So the benchmarks are in, and the RTX 4090 is a beast. Not only that, it's a price to performance winner beyond anything of the last couple of generations. In spite of that, some people think you shouldn't buy it. Some other people think this is still part of Nvidia's evil plan to con you out of your hard-earned gamer dollars. Who's right? I am. The RTX 4090 is testing off the charts. Literally. See this chart? The one Nvidia gave us that everyone said would be overblown with cherry-picked examples and not at all representative of pure performance? Yeah, they sandbagged. In Assassin's Creed Valhalla, they promised 50% uplift and delivered 65. Resident Evil Village is on the money at 75%. In multi-game averages at 4K, it's leading by 55 to 65%, depending on whose test you look at. Until you turn on ray tracing, when it jumps to 80%. These are the pure numbers everyone was saying wouldn't exist. No DLSS, no frame generation, just power. But I don't even think those numbers matter because, as I have said over and over, why would you pay $1,600 for something and then turn all the cool stuff off? What happens when you turn on DLSS? Check this out from Digital Foundry.
Since we've just talked about how Spider-Man is indeed CPU limited on 4090, let's look at that in closer focus. Here's the Fisk construction mission, which takes place in the open world with full ray tracing enabled, everything maxed there. And it is essentially CPU limited across the board. There's barely any gain from DLSS 2 here versus native rendering. That's how performant the 4090 is in this title, even at 4K max.
This card is so fast that one of the most powerful CPUs on the market can't fill it up at 4K. That is fast. Honestly, that's all we need to know about performance because the rest is just perception and decision making. Now that the numbers are out, I feel even more strongly that this should have been released as a Titan, but I think it should have been more comparable in price to the Titan RTX, which launched at $2499. Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah, that's out of the reach of most gamers, but you shouldn't care about that. Because basically every benchmark has shown that if you don't have one of these CPUs, and a 4K 120Hz monitor, you're going to leave performance on the table. You literally can't get what you paid for. And if you're not careful with your power supply, you might burn your house down. It's sitting in the same place as the Ryzen 7000. Amazing performance, but the additional costs to make use of it are prohibitive. Like any luxury, you can't just pay for the one thing. If Nvidia had released this as a Titan for $2,500, they would have changed the perception from ultra high-end gaming card to phenomenal prosumer workstation card. And that would make all the difference to the value proposition to the whole RTX 4000 lineup. Suddenly, the RTX 4080 Ti, yes, the 4080 Ti. If everyone else can change the names of products just because they don't like them, then so can I. Now that Nvidia has unlaunched the 4080 12GB, this joke doesn't really hit anymore. Am I going to remove it? No, I am not. It's the initial flagship with the expectation of a 4090 and 4090 Ti at later dates. There would be a little more pressure on the 4080 Ti to show a big improvement over the 3090 Ti, but it's likely to do that, so it shouldn't bother you as Nvidia. It would actually reduce the pressure some. At this point, there's likely to be a massive performance gap between the 4090 and the 4080 Ti, which will create a lot of downward pricing pressure and make it hard to justify the $1,200 MSRP. Based on the CPU limitations mentioned earlier, most of the performance advantages are going to be seen in productivity and content creation benchmarks and not in gaming. Another argument in favor of releasing this as a Titan rather than as a 4090. Typically at the high end, the incremental cost increases, but in this case, it's like buying GPU performance at Costco. I think they did that intentionally, probably to bind AMD's hands, but they're going to hurt their own subsequent launches because within the pricing window they've created, the price of the 4080 and 4080 Ti are just too high. Not only would a $2,500 Titan AD have opened the pricing window and removed that downward pressure, but it would have relieved some supply tension that's sure to be created as content creators, who can actually use the power this card offers, try to get their hands on one, or several. Content creators. Video editors, YouTubers, streamers, 3D animators, VFX creators, and more can see great benefits from this card. Check out Epos Vox for some of the relevant benches. They have no frame caps. CPU bottlenecks are very different, and it doesn't take a $1,000 monitor to see it in action. Renders complete faster. Streams are clearer and smoother. Editing workflow is seamless. This saves time, increases productivity, and improves the product you're working on directly. That is to say, they can make money off of this. And honestly, an investment of a few $1,000s in saving 20% of the time needed for every render and export is a freaking steal if you're doing this full time, which is why they're frequently willing to pay $2,000 to $4,000 for the artists formerly known as Titan and Quadro. But with the price as low as it is, low being relative of course, it supports the perception that it's a gaming card, and gamers will be enticed to buy it without realizing the rest of the investment necessary to make it worthwhile. If you've got a 1440p 144Hz monitor or a 4K 60, you can max out your monitor with a 3090 Ti if your CPU is up to it. And if not, a 3090 Ti and a 5800X3D is less than a 4090. It also creates a perception, true or not, that Nvidia is trying to raise the price floor on graphics cards as a whole to take advantage of gamers. Just like the old gypsy woman said.
And this is where the problem comes in. Nvidia is normalizing a hyper expensive GPU as really the new normal. This insane performance is all on purpose. You can bet if the GPU market wasn't bad like it is now, with Nvidia holding on to really legions of RTX 3000 GPUs that it can't sell because crypto mining ended, gaming demand has been down, their quarterly losses are definitely staggering compared to what they were making. All of these factors make them pump up this GPU to these levels. They could have easily artificially limited this GPU so it didn't perform this well, but they're doing the opposite. They're making it so it's really difficult for you, the high-end enthusiast, the gamer who would have the budget to buy this, to second guess buying this GPU.
If that's what they're trying to do, and I really don't think they are, but if they are, this is a terrible way to do it. Because with the massive performance increase and the minuscule price increase, they've just put a ceiling on the market. AMD can't release anything close to this price because no one expects their ray tracing to match up. And Nvidia only has room for 10% more cores on this die before it's filled up. And there's nowhere to go performance-wise anyway. So they can only go down. And they will. I honestly don't know how a 4080 Ti can maintain the $1,200 price looking at the specs. I know the performance doesn't just scale with cores, but it does a little, right? It's got 59% of the cores and 66% of the memory, along with a smaller bus, less cache, and a lower power limit. How can we possibly expect this to scale at 75%? I don't think it can. And even if it does, it'll look bad on a price to performance basis, because lower tier products, not just in GPUs, but in the entire economy, tend to win on this metric. If it only ties, there will be whining, and it will open a door for AMD to slide into the pricing sheet with stellar MSRPs. We already know they have more pricing headroom than Nvidia. So I think the biggest risk is Nvidia ceding the mid-range to AMD for half a year while they get new SKUs ready to fill the price gaps. And with the unlaunching of the RTX 4080 12GB, this is now the reality. AMD is free to run the mid-range while Nvidia completely reshapes its pricing strategy. If they had released this card as a Titan, they could have kept the performance crown and not given up the pricing freedom on the rest of their cards. Hell, $900 for a 4080 might have seemed phenomenal by comparison. And it would have taken the pressure off AMD to undercut on price because there would be plenty of open space in the performance chart for them to fill. This really looks like 3 straight times Nvidia tried to play games with their MSRPs at launch and 3 straight big honking fails. Now you have to ask yourself, do I need this card? No, you do not. But if you're not buying what I'm selling, or you're the type that bought the Titan for gaming anyway, then you have to ask yourself a different question. How do I decide if I want this card? Can you make money off of it? This is pretty basic. Are you doing work that requires a GPU, and can you get paid for it? That's not enough though. For an investment of this size, you really need to be already making money in the field. For example, I am not making money off YouTube yet, so this card isn't on the table for me. Will the added efficiency actually make you more productive? We've now established that you need a GPU for work, and that work is already paying. The next question is whether the improved performance will actually make you more productive. By that I mean, will you do more paying work as a result of this? Just doing the work you have faster doesn't totally justify the spend, only if you'll be able to do more volume and thereby make more money. If you're being honest, the answer to these questions is probably no. So don't buy this card. Not because it's too expensive, but because it's expensive and you probably can't really utilize it without spending a lot more, or you won't be doing more work as a result of the increased efficiency. For any gamer who isn't trying to edit 8K footage for money a la Epos Fox, buying this would be a bad decision. Actually, buying it in 2022 would be a bad decision. Late next year, when the recession settles in, inflation slows down, and the market and supply chains have worked themselves out, prices will be down. I wouldn't consider it until Black Friday 2023 at the earliest. If you're considering an upgrade, of course you are, or why else would you be watching this? I interviewed streamers and fans at TwitchCon about their hardware choices, and we're going to talk about planning builds and upgrades in the next video. None of these numbers were unknown to Nvidia, so they had a plan when they set the name and price of this card. AMD, however, would have only been speculating like the rest of us, and they've probably been caught off guard. And that's the point. This is a shot across AMD's bow, though I think they might have just taken the mask clean off. I didn't think AMD could compete, but now seeing that Nvidia released a consumer GPU that reaches a CPU bottleneck at 4K 120 and increases the ray tracing advantage, I don't see a path for AMD to compete at the high end. Combine that with the absurdly low MSRP, and Nvidia has seriously compressed the pricing options available to AMD for their high-end SKUs. Even if the flagship 7900 XT could compete on pure horsepower, AMD would need a revolutionary breakthrough in engineering just to enter the ray tracing performance race. Consumers will be thinking about that when they head out on Black Friday and Cyber Monday. AMD will have to price their cards to account for what will likely be comparatively lackluster ray tracing performance, regardless of their raster numbers. They'll probably be capped out at $1,200 to $1,300, which is within the rumored $1,000 to $1,500, but probably lower than they'd like. So I'm expecting AMD to release the 7700 or 7700 XT first to steal the mid-range before trying to battle the 4090. What do you think? Is the price too low? Is it a devious scheme to take your money by selling you something awesome at a reasonable price? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.